Specialist Navy divers called in after a military helicopter crash off the Queensland coast, with the PM saying the thoughts of the nation are with the crew's families and colleagues. The Greens stand to fight on the government's signature housing bill as rumours of an early federal election and a double dissolution swirl. Mark McGowan's Rockingham replacement decided as Labor retains the seat comfortably despite a 30% swing away from them. And in sport, the AFL launches an investigation after Port Adelaide's Alira Lee was let back onto the ground just minutes after a sickening head clash. Good evening. We begin with the latest on the military helicopter crash off the Queensland coast. Specialist Navy divers have today been called in to assist in the search after debris was found late yesterday. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has today spoken, saying the thoughts and prayers of the entire nation are with the four crew's family members and colleagues. National Affairs Editor Austin Pollock has the latest developments.
Well, the search for a missing helicopter and its crew has resumed after a day of searching yesterday. The MRH-90 chopper went down near Hamilton Island in Queensland at around 10:30 on Friday. We know that since the initial search began, some debris has been recovered, but none of the four crew members have been located. The wreckage is now being examined by authorities. Today, specialist Navy divers were also deployed, with authorities saying the water around the potential impact area is quite deep. And we've also had quite a lot of reaction from this from politicians. Opposition leader Peter Dutton saying late yesterday, heartbreaking news to hear of the crash, while a joint statement from Anthony Albanese and Defence Minister Richard Marles said they had the utmost confidence in the professionalism and skill of the search and rescue team. Defence Chief Richard Marles saying yesterday the focus was on finding the crew and supporting their families. Also saying he deeply appreciated the assistance from Queensland Police, the Australian Maritime Safety Agency and the United States Forces.
I'd like to thank the support from other nations during this search effort. Our nation offers them all the strength that we can while their work goes on. I encourage serving members, their families and veterans to reach out for help during this difficult time, should they need it. This is a stark reminder that there are no safe or easy days for those who serve in our country's name. These Australians were taking part in Exercise Talisman Sabre, bringing together 13 nations and up to 30,000 personnel.
Now, here at the inaugural Army base, a series of protesters have shown up protesting these current training operations which Australia is conducting, but also protesting the AUKUS agreement and rising tensions within the Pacific. Six News spoke to the president of the IPEN network and other delegates at the protest.
And they're all up in Shoalwater Bay right now. We've lost 4 young men in that horrific helicopter crash, and we grieve for their families and friends that their lives have been lost unnecessarily, because the drums of war that have been beating particularly over the last few years, are unnecessary. And we really think cooperation versus competition is what we've really got to concentrate on.
What are you out here today to protest?
We're here today to protest Talisman Sabre exercise that's currently underway. We've brought to Australia 2 wonderful women from Pacific Islands that are heavily militarised. The islands of Guahan and the island of Okinawa, where for many, many years the United States has had intense numbers of their forces based, where they live under the threat of the effects of these soldiers and military personnel.
We're out here today to stand in solidarity for peace and genuine security for the Pacific. At home, our islands, the Marianas Islands, including Guahan, the islands north of us, Tinian, Saipan, and Rota, are being set up to be the site of war. It's really disheartening to stand here because, at home, July and August are the months where we commemorate a lot of the violence that happened around World War II. A lot of people don't realize that we were attacked within hours from Pearl Harbor. We were occupied by Japanese imperial forces for around 3 years, and then a violent American recapture with several horrors our people have experienced. If Guam's attacked, the nuclear submarines in this area, that the justification to keep them here is for that kind of war. And it's very disheartening to hear the people who are criticizing this action, because they should join us. It's for their children. It's for all future generations of the world that we are here. It's to protect our waters from contamination, our sacred sites, our traditional medicines, our cultures, for all future generations. And then there are also many people who support us, who are cheering us on, who are honking, and that's very hopeful.
The training operation that involves the chopper was between Australia forces, United States forces and other allies. They have been taking place in Queensland and the Northern Territory and resumed late yesterday.
The federal government's proposed crackdown on fake news will not affect mainstream media, according to Communications Minister Michelle Rowland. Tech giants could be fined millions of dollars if they allow the spread of misinformation and disinformation on their platforms under the proposed legislation. Ms. Rowland today said professional news content is specifically excluded under it.
This is, again, about keeping Australians safe. This is about holding the digital platforms to account for what they already say they will do. They have a voluntary code of practice in place at the moment, and that has been found to need extra teeth in terms of enforcement. So this is about the regulator holding the platforms to account for what they say they will do about harmful mis and disinformation. Professional news content is specifically excluded, as is authorised election content.
The legislation would boost the Australian Communications and Media Authority's powers, but Ms. Rowland said it would not give the regulator any powers to remove content or order content to be removed. The bill has been met with criticism. United Australia Party Senator Ralph Babbitt calling it dangerous, claiming it has the power to silence your right to speak or question the official government or establishment narrative. The Greens are remaining defiant on Labor's signature housing bill as rumours of an early federal election and possible double dissolution continue to swirl. The party's deputy leader, Mehreen Faruqi, says she wants Labor to sit down with her and stop talking about what she's called ridiculous ideas of a double dissolution. In the event of a double dissolution, both the House of Representatives and the entire 76-seat Senate, not just half, as per usual, would go to an election. Senator Faruqi added that people will not take kindly to the government forcing them to an early election rather than addressing and stopping the housing crisis. The PM has ruled out heading to the polls this year, but that may leave the door open for an election in 2024. The latest it can be held is mid-2025, which would be in line with the usual 3-year cycle as seen most recently. Labor has suffered a swing of more than 30% away from them in a WA state by-election. Voters headed to the polls in Rockingham to decide on former Premier Mark McGowan's replacement. The seat has always been held by Labor since its creation, and at the 2021 state election, the party achieved an extraordinary 82% of first preferences and 87.7% on two-party preferred. The latest figures from the WAEC have Labor just shy of winning on primary vote alone. They're at 49.85%. The Liberals are only at 17.6% in second place, followed by independent Hayley Edwards at 14.9%, legalised cannabis at 7.26%, and the Greens at 5.14%. On a two-party preferred level, Labor is at 67%, which is down 20, meaning the seat will still remain very safe for them. WAMN News' Ivan Lung, who's in Perth, has more on what the results do and don't mean for Premier Roger Cook.
Voting trends are returning to pre-COVID levels, and drops on marginal seats will be coming back, because obviously, although Mark McGowan was highly popular, Magenta Marshall did not hold the rock star status Mr. McGowan has, and of course the popularity will drop. Having said that, though, Peter Hudson managed to double his vote for the Liberal camp. That's a very, very, very good sign for the Liberal opposition, but there's still plenty of work to do. Magenta Marshall's main challenger, Hayley Edwards, which is also a former Labour Party member and also the Deputy Mayor of Rockingham, she has managed to secure a very good percentage indeed, but unfortunately it's not enough to threaten the Labour vote at this point. So the takeaway at this point is that at the end of the day, Labour Party and also Premier Cook has to prepare the voters' mindset that they are returned to pre-COVID levels, and that means other seats, preference for, sorry, not preference, but rather the margins for Labour Party will drop. And on the other hand, some of the seats such as South Perth, such as Netlands, will be very interesting because they were the crown jewel of the Liberal seats. So they've never voted Labour; it's always Liberal. So whether those seats and also the seats who are swing seats will be swinging towards the other side, the more conservative side of politics, that will be something that the Labour Party will have to work on and try to salvage as much as they can.
Of course, he's just under doubled at Peter Hudson, the Liberal candidate, the party's margin. But given Labor's had a swing away from them of almost 30%, it's really not that good for the Liberals. They, barely picked up 15%-ish. They at one point were barely ahead of legalised cannabis, and still Hayley Edwards is pretty close to them in second place. What have the Liberals said about this? Again, no one was really expecting them to win, but surely do just a little better than 17%.
Well, again, at the end of the day, this is a heavy Labour seat. So Liberals have polled pretty well already. And on the other hand, you got to remember, as I said, Hayley Edwards have took away large chunks of the Labour votes as well. In fact, many of her supporters are Labour people. So, as I said, this will be an interesting race to watch. In fact, in 2025, let's see whether Hayley Edwards can pick it up. But at this point is also I suppose a bit of an encouragement for the Liberal Party as the 2025 state election is coming. They have a lot of work to do to ensure that they get more votes on other seats that are not Labour safe seats, but most importantly, the seats that they used to have for such a long time. As I said before, Netlands, South Perth, and all the others. What you've described, Leo, was sort of asking, well, Labour didn't poll well in Cottesloe. Well, Cottesloe, Labour will never poll well because it's a Liberal seat. So the next election the focus will be on swing seats, and I'm very anticipated to see how much Labour can defend, and in fact, can Labour actually manage to able to fend off the Liberals back in the old safe seats. It will be a great story to actually observe and to report on. I'm not so sure whether the Aboriginal Heritage Act will strongly affect many voters in Rockingham. It will definitely affect a lot of other electorates, especially those in the regional electorates. But Rockingham, I'm not so sure. On the other hand, Roger Cook can, of course, breathe sigh of relief, a little bit more relief tonight, because obviously the polling was suggesting that the Hayley Edwards was actually more stronger than what the results was showing last night. So, in my view, in the long run, the Liberal Party, as I said, I really want to observe to see what they will be and how they will strategize, because Peter Hudson was a very experienced candidate already at the age of 21. I'm very certain that he will have a bigger future, a bigger part to play in the party in the upcoming years before the state election. I definitely look forward to see what's going to happen from here. But the polling, on the other hand, yes, you can based on the polling say, right, it's more of a knee-jerk reaction and dummy spitting to a certain extent, because at the end of the day, these laws could have been better implemented, could have been better put together. In fact, the Greens, my understanding is that the Greens want the law to be even more stricter than this level. So it will be interesting to see how will it affect, though, because at the end of the day, though, most of the viewers and electorates in the city, they are focusing more on the cost of living and housing, but rather than Aboriginal First Nations land heritage laws. But having said that, one of the Liberal MLCs who came onto this program tonight saying that it may affect food prices. So we might have a bite back, but I'm looking forward to explore the issues further in the coming weeks and months.
A judge has thrown out former US President Donald Trump's lawsuit against CNN. Trump claimed the network's description of his claims of fraud in the 2020 presidential election as the big lie associated him with Adolf Hitler. The judge says while the comments were repugnant, they were not defamatory. It comes as he faces new charges over classified documents handling. North American correspondent Wyatt Sharp has more.
a lot of people that I speak with that are close to the former president, they themselves aren't looking at this from a very positive angle, even if that is what is being detected in fundraising and in polling numbers. I was actually talking with Brian Karam, who is a columnist and a reporter at the White House on my own program just the other day, and he very much agreed with the statements that I'm making here right now, that a lot of this polling data, of course, polling's not always accurate, and that there are, of course, a large number of people who perhaps are not looking too positively at this Donald Trump possible indictment, as we are seeing right now.
And meanwhile, Ron DeSantis' own campaign does not seem to be going well, and he could even lose second place among Republicans to Vivek Ramaswamy. What exactly is going on?
Yeah, I actually sat down with Vivek Ramaswamy just the other day for a conversation with him about his presidential campaign. And certainly just from talking with him and through other people reacting to the interview, he seems to have a lot of positive momentum going for him at this point in time. There was a Kaplan poll that also just recently came out that showed him and Ron DeSantis in a race for second place. They were both tied at 12% to former President Donald Trump at 48% of the vote. Ron DeSantis was, of course, as you and I have talked about before, Leo, seen as one of the most preferred governors out of any Trump-like supporters amongst the entirety of the United States. But now that he presents a challenge to Donald Trump in this campaign in terms of fundraising and polling, Donald Trump has taken a bit of a different perspective, given that they are likely to end up on a debate stage together, and they will be the two that are debating each other the most. But it is looking like that could change, of course, with Vivek Ramaswamy, who is also running in this campaign, and perhaps soon Ramaswamy could present a bigger challenge to Donald Trump than Ron DeSantis. I mean, Donald Trump has been going down in the polls. Ron DeSantis has been going down in the polls, and Vivek Ramaswamy, he's been surging in the polls. So many people have been using the analogy that he is similar to the Andrew Yang of the 2020 Democratic primary this time around. So certainly we are looking to see what will happen, but Ron DeSantis is really not seeing a lot of positive momentum towards his campaign at this point in time.
And look, just on the Democrats here, we know Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Marianne Williamson, they're two challengers. Are they, and also Cornel West, are they possible third-party challenges that the Democrats could or should be worried about?
Sure, it certainly is a possibility. I actually spoke with Cornel West just the other day, and he is someone who is getting a lot of momentum as far as third-party candidates' standards go. Obviously, no third-party candidate has ever been successful in terms of actually getting into the White House. It's always been ruled by the two major parties, Democrats and Republicans. But for third-party standards, Cornel West is doing rather positively. I mean, he has the momentum of a lot of more progressive Democrats than someone like Joe Biden. But also you have Marianne Williamson and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I spoke with Marianne Williamson recently as well, who is hoping to make a long shot win against President Joe Biden. She's making a primary challenge against President Joe Biden for the nomination. She hopes to do it by picking up those types of Biden supporters that would fit more under the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders angles of the Democratic Party. She's very much someone who is looking at the progressive elements of liberal politics, like implementing universal child care, universal health care in the United States, and a number of other things as well, things that the current president, President Biden, really doesn't seem too keen on doing at this point.
The European Union has suspended all security cooperation and funding support to the West African nation of Niger after the military took power in a coup. Western nations have condemned it, with the president currently believed to be detained. 6 News GovCheck editor and the host of Between Parks Place and Capitol Hill, Stuart Jeffrey, has more.
The latest we know is that the president and his family are currently being held by General Chiani. He is currently the interim leader of this new National Security Council that has been instated by the military in Niger. Given the situation in the broader region known as the Sahel in West Africa, it's not unsurprising to hear that this is happening. There have been recent coups in Mali to the west, And also, we've had conflict in the Central African Republic and in Chad as well, and a coup in Burkina Faso just last year. Almost all of these actions have received backing from the Russian government. In fact, the Wagner Group, who was involved in that kind of civil war coup attempt, not really in Russia just a few weeks ago, has been involved in these conflicts. For example, one of the countries has agreed to the point of saying to Russia, "You protect us and we'll give you access to all of our natural resources." In fact, right now, there is a meeting going on in St. Petersburg in Russia between African leaders and the Russian government about relations between Africa and Russia, although this conflict has hurt that somewhat. This region is entirely, or almost entirely, was French colonies. The previous government, the ousted government in Niger, was very much pro-France. French and US forces, along with a few other NATO forces, but mainly the US and the French with military bases, the US having a drone base in Niger, were engaging in counter-terrorist activities against Al-Qaeda, which was operating in the region. Of course, this is an area where there's lots of religious conflict. You've got the Muslims who have been there for centuries, and also Christianity, which was brought in by the colonial powers and by Portuguese traders, which goes back a few centuries as well. So there's deep-seated religious conflict there, as well as racial conflict, because, of course, this is a neo-colonial issue that's going on right now. A lot of the opposition to the intervention by Western forces is driven by concerns over neocolonialism. However, the African Union has also given an ultimatum that the coup has 2 weeks to disband or they will get involved. So hopefully, fingers crossed, the involvement of the African Union will do something to dispel these concerns of it simply being a neo-colonial intervention in Niger. The EU has pledged support both financially and with material to the ousted government, and we're expecting the same sort of support from the African Union. I don't believe we will see military forces operating with anything further than internal security from the EU, NATO, or the African Union. Of course, this is because you require UN authorization to get involved. That requires the UN Security Council, and the UN Security Council has Russia sitting as a permanent member with a veto. This coup would probably have Russian backing, and in fact, with the US and French forces withdrawn, Russia has the chance to come and fill in that counterterrorism role, increasing ties between the new government and Russia. So there's definitely going to be limitations on what the West and what the African Union can do in Niger due to the limitations imposed by the structure of the UN. However, we could see military involvement if it gets incredibly out of hand, but that would likely see the Wagner Group even potentially being brought back in. So until Russian forces or forces from China or some other player are sent in, until that point in time, I doubt we'll see any involvement, militarily speaking, from NATO or from the African Union.
All right, changing pace into sport now, and the AFL has launched an investigation after a sickening head clash in Port Adelaide's loss to Adelaide last night. Aliir collided with teammate Lockie Jones in the second quarter, but Aliir was allowed back onto the ground after just 5 minutes. The AFL is now looking into the Power's concussion management decisions. The Crows won the showdown 112-65, with Port now just holding on to second place on the ladder with a few rounds remaining. Sticking with the footy, in Port Melbourne have won their first VFL Women's Premiership, defeating Collingwood by 2 goals. The Pies had finished first on the ladder at the end of the regular season, while the Borough was second. Collingwood had defeated Port Melbourne in the qualifying final, but they weren't good enough for a win today, going down 3-5, 23 to 5-5. 35. The 2023 AFLW season will start on Friday, September 1. English bowler Stuart Broad has announced his retirement from Test cricket after a 17-year career. Broad says the current Ashes Test will be his last. He says he only made the decision around 8:30 last night. Broad has 600 Test wickets, his best performance being 8 for 15. England currently leads by 377 runs in the final test of the series, but no matter the result, Australia will retain the Ashes. Now, Ivan Melly in Perth with what's making news right now on WAMN News.
Thanks, Leo. Tonight on WAMN News, make up your mind on The Voice. An exclusive WAMN News poll confirms whether you have set your ways in the upcoming Voice to Parliament referendum.
Also tonight, the latest analysis of the Rockingham by-election and what it means for the 2025 state elections.
Community in shock as police investigates a suspected double murder-suicide incident across Perth suburbs.
Controversial One Nation leader Pauline Hanson in Perth as she campaigns against The Voice. And later, Dr. Andrew Miller's comment. Join us tonight on the WAMN News Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Right, a reminder of the top stories we are following on 6NewsAU, and specialist Navy divers have been today called in to assist in the search for a military helicopter after debris was found late yesterday. PM Anthony Albanese has today spoken, saying the thoughts and prayers of the nation are with the 4 crew members' families and colleagues. The Greens are remaining defiant on Labor's signature housing bill as rumours of an early election continue to swirl. The party's deputy leader Marine Faruqi says she wants Labor to sit down and stop talking about ridiculous ideas of a double dissolution. The PM has ruled out heading to the polls this year, but that may leave the door open for an election in 2024. And that is 6 News for this hour. There is more news 24/7 on our website, 6newsau.com, and on social media. Just search 6NewsAU to find us. More news coverage continues right after this. For now though, I'm Leonardo Puglisi. Thanks for your company. Good night.